September 10 Wednesday is surprise. Not because the day carries some inherent magic, nor because the number and the weekday conspire with unseen forces, but because every date that presses itself into the rhythm of our lives bears within it the possibility of the extraordinary hidden in plainness. We are inclined to believe that surprise belongs to festivals, to the rare occasions when the world calls us to attention with banners and trumpets. But in truth it is the quiet Wednesday, marked only by the passing of sun and clock, that becomes the dwelling place of revelation. For we live most of our lives not on mountaintops, but in valleys, not in holidays, but in the long procession of workdays. And it is here that surprise enters most stealthily. The human heart expects much from New Year's Eve, from weddings, from the great gatherings that are anticipated for months, yet it forgets that the deepest joy often steals upon us when no herald announces its arrival, when no calendar warns us of the intrusion of wonder. To call September 10 a surprise is to acknowledge that the world itself is a stage upon which unseen hands arrange their drama. The day wears its common dress, the familiar sky, the same hour for meals, the same faces in their familiar places. But the pulse beneath the visible is not ordinary. It is as though eternity threads its needle through the fabric of time, weaving golden strands into what we had dismissed as grey cloth. A Wednesday becomes charged with meaning, not because men conspire to make it so, but because the Eternal chooses such moments to whisper its secrets. We often imagine that surprises must be sudden and noisy, as though the thunderbolt were their proper symbol. But the truth is subtler. Surprise often comes as the dawning recognition that what we had overlooked is in fact overflowing with wonder. The sparrow on the windowsill, the stranger's smile, the letter that arrives unlooked for, the turn of a phrase in a book. All these carry the same quality of shock, the revelation that life is deeper and richer than we supposed, and yet we resist surprise. We build schedules and timetables, we stack our lives with predictability, for we fear the loss of control. Our calendars become fortresses, our routines become shields. But September 10, the Wednesday in question, disregards these defenses. For surprise is not an enemy, but a liberator. It tears down the illusion that we are masters of our days and reveals instead that we are guests in a house we did not build. When surprise enters, pride shudders, control trembles, but gratitude awakens. The machinery of habit is disrupted, and we find ourselves asking, what more have I missed? How many treasures have I passed by, because they wore the disguise of the ordinary? Consider the nature of a Wednesday. It stands in the middle of the week, unglamorous, neither the freshness of Monday's start nor the relief of Friday's release. It is the day most like life itself, a stretch of duty, a repetition of tasks, a pause in the long march. To mark this day as surprise is to declare that no day is neutral ground. Every moment hums with possibility, and the eternal hides not only in temples and mountain heights, but in the silent corridors of the commonplace. The child who runs across the street laughing, the sudden fragrance of bread drifting from a bakery, the forgotten photograph uncovered in a drawer. These are the ways in which surprise enters. To be alive is to be ambushed by wonder, provided we have not deadened our senses with the anesthesia of familiarity. There is a danger in thinking of surprise only as pleasant. True surprise often wounds before it heals, unsettles before it comforts. The letter that brings news of loss, the diagnosis that interrupts a plan, the storm that changes a journey. All these too are surprises, and yet even here the deeper pattern holds. For surprise is not merely the sudden appearance of joy. It is the breaking open of expectation, the rupture of the small world we have constructed. September 10 may bring sorrow as well as gladness, but in both it serves the same function to awaken us to the reality that life is never ours to control, that meaning lies beyond our management. Surprise shatters our idols of predictability and forces us to reckon with the fact that we are not sovereign but pilgrims, not engineers of destiny but travelers upon a road whose turns we cannot foresee. The human spirit thrives not in endless certainty, but in the tension between the expected and the unforeseen. The farmer plants his field knowing the rhythm of seasons, yet each harvest carries its own surprises. The teacher enters the classroom with a lesson prepared, yet the spark in a child's eyes may alter the entire day. The traveler boards the train with ticket in hand, yet a conversation with a stranger changes the journey. To live well is not to abolish surprise but to welcome it, to hold our plans lightly, to know that the interruption may be the true gift. September 10 stands as a parable of this truth, that an ordinary Wednesday may bear the weight of eternity, that the disguise of routine may be rent, and the astonishment of reality may burst through. It is easy to imagine that surprise is for the young, that only the child retains the capacity to wonder, but in truth it is the hardened heart of adulthood that most desperately needs to be surprised. The child is already awake to the marvel of existence, seeing dragons in the clouds and kingdoms in the backyard. It is the adult who yawns at the stars, who rushes past the blossom, who calculates each hour as currency to be spent. To such a soul, September 10 comes like an uninvited guest, overturning the table of cynicism, demanding attention to the banquet spread before him. Surprise is a form of mercy, for it rescues us from the prison of indifference, shakes us from the slumber of self-sufficiency, and returns us to the posture of wonder that is the beginning of wisdom. The very structure of time is designed to conceal and reveal surprises. Each sunrise is both utterly predictable and utterly astonishing. Each breath, repeated thousands of times a day, remains a miracle we hardly notice. We move from second to second as though carried on a conveyor, yet at any instant the curtain may lift and reality may appear with startling freshness. September 10 Wednesday is surprise not because it is unique among days, but because it represents the truth of all days. Every date on the calendar waits with its hidden store of marvels. Every hour is pregnant with meanings unseen. What marks one day as surprise is not the invention of novelty, but the awakening of perception. The world has always been ablaze with glory. We are merely blind until something startles us awake. To be startled awake is not always comfortable. The dawn is harsh on eyes accustomed to darkness. The knock on the door is unwelcome to the one who wishes to be undisturbed. But comfort is not the goal of surprise. The goal is truth, and truth, once seen, cannot be unseen. The Wednesday we thought dull reveals itself as radiant, and suddenly the whole week is transformed. The chain of days, once a monotony, becomes a necklace of jewels, each gem unique, each shining with a light borrowed from eternity. To walk through life expecting surprise is not to live in anxious anticipation, but to live in readiness. Like a guest at a feast who knows the host delights in serving courses unannounced. The feast is richer for its unpredictability, the joy keener for its suddenness. September 10, then, is not a single event but a symbol, a reminder that time itself is woven with surprise. We live in the illusion of control, but life delights in humbling us with its unexpected gifts and shocks. We imagine we know what tomorrow holds, but tomorrow has never yet belonged to us. We think of Wednesday as merely the midpoint, but Wednesday may hold the revelation that redefines our journey. To call the day surprise is to confess that we are not the authors of the story, but its readers, turning each page without knowledge of the next. The author delights in suspense, in sudden turns, in unveiling glories at the moment least expected. We are characters who must learn to trust, to watch, to remain awake lest we miss the moment when the ordinary bursts into flame. Expectation is the quiet architect of human life, building its invisible scaffolding around our days, guiding our steps with unseen patterns, whispering promises about what lies ahead. It is in the morning when a child sets out shoes by the bed, convinced that tomorrow will bring school and familiar faces. It is in the grown man who checks his watch, trusting the train will arrive as it did yesterday. It is in the woman who fills her basket with flour, expecting bread to rise when the yeast is mixed and the oven warmed. Expectation is the rhythm of our existence, the invisible melody that steadies our walk. And yet into this rhythm comes suddenness, disruptive and startling, the crash of cymbals into a quiet symphony. The lightning that tears across the sky without warning, the sudden voice that calls a name in the crowd. The strange marriage of these two, expectation and suddenness, creates the very texture of surprise, and within that union lies the deepest form of awakening, for expectation alone is insufficient. It makes us planners, calculators, builders of castles in the mind, but left to itself it dulls the senses. A man who expects everything grows blind to wonder, for when the anticipated comes he treats it not as gift but as right. He eats the bread without marvel, seeing only flour and yeast where mystery resides. He boards the train without thought, as though the miracle of iron and steam were no more remarkable than a stone upon the road. He kisses his child without awe, forgetting that each day together is a reprieve, a mercy not guaranteed. Expectation can harden into entitlement, and entitlement into blindness. But suddenness pierces this veil. Suddenness arrives when we do not plan, when the heart is unguarded, when the scaffolding of control collapses, and we are forced to confront reality as it is, raw and blazing. And in that moment, surprise becomes both gift and awakening. Consider how suddenness colors memory. The events most cherished or most dreaded are rarely those carefully scheduled, but those that erupted unbidden. The knock at the door bringing news long awaited. The unexpected letter that changes the course of a year. The sudden sight of a long, lost friend on a crowded street. Or equally the moment when plans crumble in an instant under the weight of accident or sorrow. These are the moments that brand themselves upon the soul, leaving scars or songs, sometimes both. And the reason they sear so deeply is because they marry what we thought would be with what actually is, tearing open the space between expectation and fulfillment. That tearing is the essence of surprise. It wounds the illusion of control but heals the deeper blindness by showing us reality in sharper colors than before. The child lives most fully in this marriage of expectation and suddenness. For the child expects, but with wonder rather than entitlement. The child believes that a birthday will bring cake, but when the candles are lit and the flame dances, there is still astonishment. The child expects a story before bed, but when the tale twists or the hero triumphs, laughter bursts forth as though it were never foreseen. The child waits at the window for a parent's return, yet when the door opens the embrace is still wild and new. The child is the model of surprise as gift, for in every expectation fulfilled there is still room for suddenness, the element of delight that cannot be charted. The adult, by contrast, grows wary, mistaking expectation for certainty, and in so doing loses the fire of sudden joy. The challenge of life is not to banish expectation, which is necessary for order and trust, but to keep it alive with wonder, so that suddenness may still awaken us when it arrives. Expectation builds our stage, suddenness sets it aflame. Both are needed, for without expectation the sudden becomes chaos, meaningless fragments that frighten rather than awaken. A life without expectation is a life of perpetual confusion, tossed by every breeze, with no rhythm, no trust, no ground. But without suddenness, expectation ossifies, life hardens into routine, and days march like soldiers in endless formation, each indistinguishable from the last. Surprise is the harmony of the two, the interplay that turns life into story. For what is a story if not expectation woven with sudden turns? The reader expects a hero to win, but does not foresee the precise moment when light conquers shadow. The traveler expects the road to lead somewhere, but the bend reveals more than maps had shown. Surprise is the ink of narrative, the seasoning of time. The way reality speaks to the soul with freshness. There is an art in learning to wait, and an art in learning to be startled. The waiting heart cultivates patience, but the startled heart cultivates humility. Patience teaches us that not all gifts are immediate, that expectation itself is a kind of reverence for the future. Humility teaches us that the future will not always conform to our design, that the most precious moments arrive without our permission. Together they form the soil of gratitude. For when suddenness meets expectation, when what we waited for comes, but comes in a form we did not imagine, we discover the richness of surprise. The farmer who expects a harvest of grain, but finds the field also alive with wildflowers experiences more than yield. he experiences wonder. The musician who expects a practiced piece but discovers an unplanned harmony in the midst of performance knows the joy of creation beyond control. The mother who expects the child to walk one day but gasps as the first steps arrive without warning feels the sweetness of both fulfillment and astonishment. We live in a world shaped by this marriage, though we rarely recognize it. The very rising of the sun is an act of expectation, for we trust it will return, and yet each dawn carries its own suddenness. A palette of colors never before repeated, clouds arranged in patterns no human hand could design. We expect the seasons, yet every spring surprises us with blossoms more vivid than memory had kept. Every autumn startles with a chill sharper than anticipated. We expect friendship, yet the sudden word of kindness at the needed hour pierces with more comfort than we could have demanded. We expect love, yet the glance across a crowded room, the hand unexpectedly reaching for ours, awakens us as though for the first time. This is the rhythm of existence, expectation steadying us, suddenness electrifying us, surprise awakening us to the truth that every moment is more than we deserve. If suddenness is gift, then expectation is its wrapping. For the gift without wrapping would not carry the same delight, and the wrapping without the gift would be an empty form. Expectation prepares the heart, gives it a container, builds the readiness to receive. But suddenness breaks the seal, tears the paper, and reveals the treasure. To live well is to keep both alive, to wait with hope yet to be ready for the tearing. Many lose this balance, leaning too heavily on one or the other. Some abandon expectation altogether, living only for sudden thrills, becoming restless wanderers, slaves to novelty, forever seeking the next burst of shock, but never grounded. Others cling so tightly to expectation that they choke the possibility of suddenness, demanding that life conform exactly to plan, resenting any deviation, blind to the gifts that come unbidden. Wisdom lies in holding both, in being grounded yet open, rooted yet supple, steady yet alert. Surprise is awakening, because it lifts the veil. We walk through life half asleep, dulled by repetition, numbed by familiarity. We think we know the shape of tomorrow, and in that assumption we lose sight of the miracle of today. Suddenness shakes us awake. It may be the sudden beauty of light through stained glass, the sudden laughter of a child in sorrow, the sudden mercy of forgiveness when we had braced for condemnation. In each case, the expected pattern is interrupted, and in that break we glimpse reality as if for the first time. We are reminded that life is not a machine grinding predictably forward, but a gift given moment by moment, undeserved, unpredictable, full of secrets. Surprise, then, is not frivolous, it is necessary. It is the only thing strong enough to rouse the soul from slumber, to break the spell of control, to awaken gratitude, and gratitude is the end toward which surprise leads. For when expectation and suddenness kiss, when the anticipated is fulfilled yet in a way more marvelous than imagined, the only proper response is thanksgiving. Not the thin gratitude of polite custom, but the deep gratitude that floods the soul with recognition that reality is richer than design, that we have received more than we asked, that the world is ablaze with generosity we cannot command. It is in this gratitude that awakening becomes complete. The eyes are opened, the heart enlarged, the spirit lifted. A Wednesday ceases to be merely a middle day and becomes a revelation. September 10 ceases to be a date on a page and becomes a parable of life itself. Expectation alone could not give this, suddenness alone could not sustain it, but their marriage, this strange and holy union, produces the miracle of surprise, both gift and awakening. The soul is forever being summoned, though the summons is often drowned by the machinery of our routines. We live in a world governed by clocks, ruled by calendars, enslaved to the strict tick of schedules, as though life were a factory belt upon which each event is stamped, measured, and delivered. We rise at appointed hours, work according to allotted tasks, break at designated times, sleep when the day is declared over, and repeat. In this regiment, it is easy to believe that life is nothing more than the sum of duties, a sequence of obligations marching steadily forward. Yet beneath this machinery there hums a deeper music, a call that is not contained by schedules, a whisper that refuses to be confined by calendars. This call is the invitation of the soul, summoning us to see beyond the machinery into the eternal weight hidden in the simplest of days. Even in the unassuming plainness of a Wednesday, the calendar tells us Wednesday is the midpoint, neither the anticipation of Monday, nor the release of Friday. It is a hinge day, a space between beginnings and endings, often dismissed as ordinary. And yet it is precisely here that the eternal weight presses most heavily. For the ordinary is the garment that eternity wears most comfortably. If we had eyes to see, we would realize that Wednesday is not filler, not a mere stepping stone between events, but a cathedral in its own right, a chamber where the eternal speaks in hushed tones. The invitation of the soul is not to escape Wednesday, but to pierce it, to perceive within its routine the deeper glory concealed. We do not usually listen, for our ears are tuned to the noise of business. The machinery of routine dulls us, persuading us that significance is found only in the grand, the dramatic, the festive. But the soul is not fooled. It knows that eternity often hides where the world least expects. It knows that the eternal weight is not measured by crowded calendars, but by moments of piercing presence. One glance at the night sky on a Wednesday evening, when the stars burn with the same fire that lit ancient wanderers, is enough to awaken the soul. One kind word exchanged at midday, unnoticed by the world but remembered in heaven, carries more weight than all the appointments penciled into a planner. The invitation is not to despise structure, for structure has its place, but to see that structure is never the substance. The clock may tell us the hour, but it does not tell us the value of that hour. The calendar may declare September 10, but it cannot measure the eternal significance concealed within. The tragedy of much of life is that we miss this invitation. We look for meaning in milestones and overlook the miracle of the mundane. We tell ourselves that purpose is found in achievements, promotions, anniversaries, holidays, and so we rush past the in-between days, blind to their radiance. Yet it is often in those very in-between days that the eternal weight leans closest. For eternity does not wait for our permission, does not schedule its revelation according to our convenience. It breaks in where it pleases, and most often it breaks into the overlooked, the forgotten, the ordinary. A Wednesday, that plainest of days, is chosen as a vessel, and if we are attentive, we discover that we were standing on holy ground all along. The machinery of routine is not evil, it is only incomplete. It keeps the world ordered, but it cannot sustain the soul. The soul longs for more than predictability, it longs for meaning. And meaning is not something the clock can deliver. Meaning bursts in when the eternal weight is glimpsed. It may come through silence, when a pause in the routine reveals the immensity of being alive. It may come through beauty, when light falls on leaves in such a way that we are stunned into stillness. It may come through love, when the familiar face across the table suddenly glows with unmerited grace. All of these can happen on a Wednesday, precisely because Wednesday is the day least suspected of grandeur. Its very ordinariness becomes the perfect veil for the eternal to hide beneath. There is a peculiar mercy in this, that eternity would choose such common ground to reveal itself. For if eternal weight were only unveiled on mountains and festivals, only at weddings or triumphs, then most of life would be barren, waiting rooms of insignificance. But when eternity hides in Wednesdays, in errands and commutes, in quiet cups of tea, then every moment is charged with potential. The invitation of the soul is not to wait for special occasions, but to attend to the present moment with reverence. To walk through a Wednesday with open eyes is to discover that the whole world is threaded with glory. The eternal weight is not elsewhere. It is here, underfoot, in the unnoticed now, and yet the machinery of routine wars against this vision. It tells us to hurry, to check the box, to move on. It whispers that this moment is disposable, that only the next matters. It convinces us that life is something always arriving, never here. But the soul knows better. It knows that eternity is not tomorrow but today, not at the end of schedules but beneath them. It is for this reason that sudden interruptions often feel so significant, because they break the machinery and force us into awareness. A broken clock, a cancelled meeting, a sudden storm. Such moments jolt us awake, and for an instant we perceive what was always true. That the eternal weight is pressing into the present, that no day is ordinary. The invitation of the soul is to live with that perception, not only in interruptions, but in the smooth flow of routine. To be awake even when nothing appears to disrupt. There is an image of a man walking through a great gallery with eyes fixed only on his watch. He moves past masterpieces of staggering beauty, yet notices nothing, because he is concerned only with how many minutes remain. This is the image of a life ruled by machinery, blind to eternity. The gallery is Wednesday itself, filled with unnoticed masterpieces, and the invitation of the soul is to lift our eyes, to see what has been there all along, to pause in the corridor of an ordinary day and perceive that time is not a prison but a canvas. The brushstrokes of eternity are painted not only in rare moments but across the entire span of life, especially in those intervals we are most tempted to overlook. September 10 is not an empty square on a planner, it is a gallery of eternal significance. If only the eyes are opened. The eternal weight is heavy, but not crushing. It is the weight of glory, the density of meaning, the assurance that life is not trivial. To sense it is to feel both small and exalted, humbled by the vastness of reality, yet lifted by the knowledge that our days matter. The machinery of routine says that Wednesday is small, forgettable, disposable. The invitation of the soul says that Wednesday is immense, eternal, radiant. The contrast could not be sharper. One reduces life to a sequence of tasks. The other expands life into a sacrament. To accept the invitation is to walk through the machinery with new vision, using schedules without being enslaved by them, keeping calendars without mistaking them for truth. For truth lies deeper, in the eternal weight pressing upon every moment, and especially in those moments we dismiss as plain. This invitation is not abstract but practical. It changes the way we drink water, for the cup is no longer merely a vessel of refreshment, but a symbol of abundance. It changes the way we greet a neighbor, for the smile exchanged is no longer trivial, but a fragment of eternal communion. It changes the way we rest at night, for sleep becomes not an interruption of productivity, but a surrender to the eternal rhythm that sustains all life. None of these require the abandonment of machinery, but each requires seeing through it, refusing to be confined by its limits. For the calendar is not the measure of eternity, the clock is not the arbiter of meaning. The soul is invited to see beyond, to live as though every Wednesday were already glowing with eternal weight, because in truth it always is. This seeing is not automatic, it must be chosen. We are surrounded by invitations that go unanswered, like unopened letters, like music never played. The machinery is loud, and the eternal is often quiet. But the quiet call is persistent, whispering through monotony, singing in silence, shimmering through interruptions. It does not force itself upon us, but it waits. And when we respond, when we allow ourselves to see, the entire world changes. The errands and commutes, the tasks and chores, become more than duties. They become stages upon which eternity dances in disguise. The eternal weight does not crush the machinery of routine, it transfigures it, turning every tick of the clock into an echo of infinity. To accept the invitation is to awaken, to live not as a prisoner of schedules, but as a guest at a feast, where even the plainest dish carries divine flavor, and even the plainest Wednesday glows with everlasting significance.